Hello, beautiful, and welcome to Finding Fertility. I'm your host, Monica Cox from findingfertility.co, and I created this podcast to help get you to start thinking outside of the box and realize that your infertility might have nothing to do with your lady bits. Rooted in functional medicine and personal experience, Finding Fertility is all about looking at the whole body and finding the root cause of your infertility. Finding Fertility does not diagnose, prescribe, or treat any issues of infertility, but what we do is take a holistic approach and improve your diet and your lifestyle to get you steps closer to creating your dream family. Just by being here with me listening to this podcast, you're already going down the right path to making your dreams come true. Let's do this together. Hey guys, I wanted to come on this week and talk about expectations. This has been brought up like almost in every conversation I've had with someone who is trying to conceive. I know for me personally, this was a big thing. I felt when I started trying to conceive at 27 that I was already old, that I was already going to have my babies by then, but my husband really wanted to wait until he was 30 and deployed on his first trip, overseas and all that. So we waited for that. And the moment he got back, we started trying. And, when we started trying, I was like, okay, I'm going to have my 2 babies by the time I'm 30. At least before I'm 30, I'm going to have my family. It's going to be great. Well, as you all know, I'm sat here and that didn't fucking happen. And it was quite devastating. And I remember getting, I was 29 and being told like, hey, IVF is your only option. We're not even going to try IUI because you're ovulating. And thank God I didn't have to go through that. Because I know a lot of women, that's like their first step, right? Go try IUI. They were like, no, you're ovulating. It's fine. That's not the issue. And it would have never worked, right? So I remember being 30 or like turning 30, and I'm like, I don't want to be doing IVF when I'm turning 30. So I waited after I turned 30 and then started IVF shortly thereafter. That was like my expectations of being a mom of 2 by the time I was 30 was like completely blown out of the water. And so I just, put more expectations. IVF was supposed to get me pregnant, considering I had nothing wrong with me and everything seemed fine. And once again, completely blown out of the water. And even like devastating in the sense that you get more of a diagnosis of like doom and gloom of like, oh, well, your egg quality is so low. This is now proven through this IVF. Oh, and by the way, there's nothing you can do about it. I'm not really sure if it was that point. I don't really know when I gave up on my expectations because I know I didn't have like the knowledge that I have now. So I couldn't tell you like, oh yeah, and then I learned this, da da da. I just kind of just stopped because it had already been over almost 4 years. And so I just didn't put any more expectations on anything. Obviously, when I went into my second round of IVF and doing my frozen embryo transfers, yeah, of course, you're always going to go in expecting to get pregnant, right? And I don't want people not have hope and not really bring that joy and that like abundance and that amazingness into that procedure, because that is really, really important. But at the same time, like the expectations, this specific conversation comes from a discovery call I did, and it was a private one, so it's not on the podcast. And the conversation about her expectations because of her age, I mean, she was only late 30s, but her husband's 10 years older than her, and she expected to be pregnant by now. She expected her first round of IVF to work and it didn't. And so she was, and I don't use this word like in a negative way, but this is what's happening. She's jumping into another round of IVF, even though she, one, doesn't feel her best.
Two, hasn't really dug into the root cause of what's going on and taken the time to heal that. And she's jumping into it because she's like, well, I want two children. And if that's going to happen, I have to act now or it's never going to happen. And so these expectations that we put on ourselves really, really kind of, one, they don't allow us to tap into our intuition, and our body's not going to tell us necessarily the future, but it's going to tell you right now the best way to act. um so my question for her was like, if these expectations were taken away, like how much easier would your life be? And when things worked or didn't work, what kind of health around mental and emotional wellness would you have, especially when they don't work? Um, Sometimes our expectations of things is actually literally the thing fucking the situation up, right? And when we push ourselves to do things because we have an expectation of what our lives were supposed to be at a certain point, we're not listening to what our bodies are saying, or maybe what the right next steps are for you, right? Like, I get it. I get why she wants to jump into that IVF. But I also, from a coach point of view, from someone who's walked the walk and been through all that point of view, through a functional medicine point of view, that is actually not going to save you time, or like, give you the time that you think you don't have. It's not going to just produce these healthy embryos that you think you might get this round. Like, it's really like you're rolling the dice, and the favors kind of aren't in your odds. If you haven't done anything dramatically different from your first IVF to your second IVF, and taken the time to heal, maybe taking the time to do some different steps, investigate more, maybe even more testing for yourselves. And I know this from personal experience. It actually like makes your journey longer. It makes your journey more expensive. It makes your journey it brings more heartache, right? And even though I did dramatic things between my first and my second IVF, I didn't follow my intuition. I just got the massive chills again, about um getting that immune testing done on myself. That's why I went there. That's why, I picked this clinic and got talked out of it, didn't follow my intuition, and jumped into another round of IVF without doing that testing, which cost me money. It cost me time because I waited another like 8 months before I did another frozen embryo transfer. Um, and yeah, obviously the heartache. I've got to say, that was probably my lowest low point after that second failed IVF, because I thought I had done everything. Like, I spent a year being quote unquote perfect and changed the diet and the lifestyle and all that. And for my body not to receive that embryo, not even to make it to day 28, I literally printed out a surrogacy form and was like, fuck this. Like, obviously my body can't do it. And that wasn't the case, right? And it was just that I didn't follow my intuition, get that that testing done about the high natural killer cells, or whatever testing that you feel that you want to explore. So when you feel time poor, when you have these expectations on yourself that you should have had this or this should have worked, the expectations itself is the thing that's kind of fucking the whole situation up. And there's a really good book called The Expectation Hangover. I highly suggest it. It's going to be down in the notes for you guys. And if this is something that you're really struggling with right now about your timeline and how things haven't worked out, um, something to really start exploring and understanding that it's actually a story that you've literally made up in your head. And because that story hasn't quote unquote come true yet, like, it just makes life that much more difficult. And I don't know, like, kind of feel like I shouldn't even say this, but when you're in the thick of it, it's really hard to see, to understand like why. Even like say with following your intuition, I feel through my journey, when I look back, not only my fertility journey, but my business journey and all that, I look back and I'm like, I understand why I had to go through so much because I wasn't fucking listening. And that is the hard truth for me. But I hope this really helps you guys if you're in that sticky situation of having these expectations and things not really working out, and really dive into that aspects. There'll be some more resources, and I'm actually going to make this a part of the course as well, because I think it's something that we all struggle with. So have a beautiful week, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you once again for tuning in to the Finding Fertility podcast. If you're loving this podcast, please leave us a rating and review and let us know how this podcast is supporting you to get steps closer to creating your dream family. I hope you have a beautiful weekend, and we will see you next Friday for another episode of the Finding Fertility podcast.